Hello, a pleasant afternoon everyone. This is I, Alan Sumili Bulay, and together with my partner, Miss Angeline T. Buhian, we are going to discuss Lesson 6, Writing the Whole News Story. So what comes in your mind when you hear the word news writing? So obviously, news writing is an important place in the process of selection of events and related facts. So if the lead tells the story in capsule, the body of the news explains the facts in detail. Should one base the meaning of news writing on this argument, a writer may surmise two concepts. So first, the body of the news retells the story found in the lead. And second, the facts are to be arranged logically in the body of the news. So with these conclusions, the writer should not only be good at sensing newsworthy items and gathering news, but also be adept in weaving the facts into the most comprehensible and logical way. So as you go on to write the body of the news item, you should not delete the image of the inverted triangle, which tells that the most important facts should come first. So however, this is mostly true to a fact story or a straight news. The action story follows a chronological arrangement of data other than according to the importance of facts. Sample stories under action story include stories that lead to themselves, such as accident, fire, some sports events, and the like. So now let's move on to the qualities of news. So the aim of a news writers is to provide stories to startle and, of course, to engage the readers within the first few sentences and in the middle to widen, deepen, or sharpen their knowledge. So as a writer, you should ensure that the news articles are of quality. So when can you say that your articles are of good quality? So the following are the qualities of the news. First, we have here fairness and balance. So as a reporter, you must learn to get others' point of view. So this may mean calling a person late at night to get his side of the story, or even holding back an investigative story for a day. But you must do so. This is the best way to bring balance in the copy. So there may be also times when an individual may avoid making statement. So in such case, state the point, indicating the efforts you made to get this or to get his point of view. So fairness requires that you do not impute motives. So this means that you should not attribute dishonesty or dishonorable motives. Remember that your news report is going to be read by hundreds of people, and you can influence their thinking by using loaded words. It is always best to use neutral words. So in balance and fairness, this means that it is the ability to write a news story without showing any form of evidence of bias and partiality. These criteria need to be considered as a new writer. Whenever you write a news story, do not judge anybody or oppose them. Second, we have here accuracy. As a reporter, you have much power. What you write can influence decisions, help from public opinions of people, and as well as to contribute to the general attitude of your readers. So with that opportunity in dipping your finger to public forum comes the huge responsibilities that cannot be taken so lightly. Say, you inadvertently committed to an error of details like misspelled the name of the guest speaker, misquoted the witness of the school crime, or omitted an essential piece of information. You only not distort the truth, which is the foreground and anchor of the news. You not only misinform the public, you also damage the credibility of your campus paper. Hence, Being accurate in your writing, whatever article that may be, is your primordial yardstick in telling if your article is of good quality. So a writer once opined, "I pardon the slight error on comma and period, but I abhor the error on datal and fact." Further, by being accurate means editing the article before you send it. So, inaccuracy, it can be regarded as inaccurate if all names, ages, addresses, and their quotations in the report are correct. So, these are the following facts that you need to check. First, the names and their spellings, their school designations, incident details. In case it is an accident, you must know the exact number of people who were injured or killed. We have here statements. The quote reported in the news report must be accurate and in context. It should not be misinterpreted to imply another meaning. We have also here scientific names. If it is a scientific story, you must make sure that all scientific names are correctly spelt and explained. And lastly, number of runs or goals. If it is a sports story, then you must make sure that the number of runs or goals being scored is mentioned accurately. The third quality is the attribution. News reports, with a few exemptions, must be sourced. So this ensures that you are injecting both facts and opinions, but the opinions are not yours. So always ask yourself, who said this? So the source can be identified as follows. First, we have here individual. So an individual who witnessed an accident or survived an earthquake can be quoted by name as an eyewitness. And we have here organization. So do not forget to attribute the statement to a spokesperson authorized by an organization to brief the media on its behalf. An organization in the school may be the Parent Teachers Association, the Faculty Club, Performing Arts Society, Supreme Student Government, and others. So the spokesman can be referred to by number 1, we have here name and designation. Like for example, Mr. Pedro Agdipa, President of the Parent Teachers Association, said that the auditorium it is very clear that it has the name and the designation has been mentioned, which is Mr. Agdipa, the President of the Parent Teachers Association. Second, designation alone. Like for example, the President of the Parent Teachers Association said that the auditorium. And third, we have here anonymous sources. So there are occasions when a news source who happens to be a senior government official or an important leader does not want his or her name to be used. So in such case, the reporter can attribute the story to informed sources, well-connected sources, official sources, or sources who do not wish to be named. However, the reporter must know the source well and should trust that information provided is correct. Like for example, we can say that according to a trusted source coming from the school, the auditorium, and lastly, we have here exceptions. The reporter need not to worry about attribution in those cases that he or she has witnessed. Like for instance, the reporter can report a valuable match or a rally stating what happened. This is because these are statements of fact that have occurred in public domain and have been witnessed by scores of people. So let's move on to the fourth quality of news. We have here brevity and clarity. Remember that newspaper writing is not just an academic writing. Hence, as a journalist, do not use big words and long sentences to show the readers how smart you are or how extensive your vocabulary is. Your communication arts teacher must have shouted this: "Write to express, not to impress." Also, remember that as a writer, your target readers or audience are pressed of time. So you have to give the news very quickly, concisely, and briefly. So think of this. If all your news stories are newsworthy and with high degree of interest, then every story in the campus paper competes for the reader's attention. So with every story you write, ask yourself, what is the news here? Then ask yourself, including the persons around you, like say for example, your co-writers. What questions will the reader have that I need to answer? So you will jot them down and be sure that none is left unanswered. When the writer, or when the reader, starts to scratch his scalp, there are only two reasons. First, his scalp is truly itchy, or second, you as the writer have failed to attain clarity. So if his reason is the second one, then the reader must be lying on a bed of thorns to grasp the details of your news story. The culprit must be your lengthy sentences and paragraph. So in short, write short sentences, short paragraphs, and short articles. Use simple words. One tip to ensure clarity is to read your story aloud. Doing this technique may be awkward, but it will help you find sentences difficult to understand. So the importance of these characteristics cannot be overstressed. You must learn to write short stories without missing important facts. Please remember that today's reader is in a hurry. He does not have lengthy patience to go through long news reports. Brevity does not only mean writing a short story. It also means using short words, short sentences, and short paragraphs. The last quality of news is the style. So good writers are artists, so are news writers too. So as a promising news writer, you can entertain, inspire, educate, and sometimes earn the ire of your readers. A song goes this: never to walk in anyone's shadow. So, as a writer, you should act according to your own style. Do not copy others' style, but always remember to follow the guidelines in writing in news articles. Look for some opportunities like the construction of your paragraph and phrases to veer from the old traditions seen in the newspaper. Never forget, though, that your primordial objective is to tell people what they need to know, not to show them how much of a literary artist you are. To carry on, let's move to the first 5 formula for an inverted triangle news story. First, we have here effective lead, focused, short, and memorable. Second, a second paragraph that amplifies the lead. So this means that the second paragraph must expand its details based on the lead. Third, a third paragraph that continues to build detail. Fourth, additional details in decreasing importance. And lastly, power quote, an interesting quote that propels meaning, not just a fluffy quote that gets in the way. So, we must use interesting quotes that forces the meaning of our news story. Now let's move on to the dose of the news writing style. First, we have here, omit needless words. So the key phrase here is the needless words. So these are words that are muddy your writing. They distract the reader from central ideas, fail to carry their weight and meaning or impact, or cloud the reader's picture of the world you are building with. Third, be sparring with your adjectives but lavish with verbs. So this means that A key to good writing is to use adjectives sparingly while choosing interesting, unusual verbs that readers don't expect. And third, beware of your special words. So always remember that you should be careful of what words you are using with. Fourth, we have here simplify words. Of course, you must simplify your words without missing effects. Fifth, remember your signpost. So it is a particular kind of meta-narrative which allows the reader to understand the intentions of the writer and to understand the ways in which the text will proceed. So now let's move on to the don'ts of news writing style. First, we have here colloquialism. So this can be described as writing in the way that one would speak. So in doing so, you should avoid using filler words. So these are words. These are short words or meaningless words that we use to fill the little pauses that occur while we decide what we are going to write or say next. We must avoid these words like beginning the sentences with basically, often, well, and so. Also, we should avoid contractions. Avoiding contractions is also included in the ambit of colloquialism. So as a journalist, you replace can't with cannot. So take note, cannot is one word. Doesn't with does not, and so on. In news writing too, you should limit your use of subjective pronouns. That is, use third-person perspective. Do not use first or second-person pronouns like I, me, you, and we. Included in the list of rules in writing is to avoid vague words. So they are described as expressions or words that are open to interpretation or that do not express precise ideas. Next, we have here circumlocution. This means that a writer uses many words where few would do. Circumlocution is basically a figure of speech where the meaning of a word or a phrase is indirectly expressed through several or many words. So it is in contrast to brevity and conciseness. Third, we have here ambiguity. This case may be syntactical or semantical. Ambiguity can be either intentional or unintentional. So when we say intentional ambiguity, may be used to mislead a reader or might be necessary due to the context or subject matter. Unintentional ambiguity, on the other hand, should always be avoided and can be with care and practice. So here are some samples of ambiguous sentences from a news report. Number 1. Dr. Malu Hu, the school principal, tells her secretary, Mrs. Anna B. Yan, that the fault was hers. So here we can ask, whose fault? Was it the school principal or the secretary? So instead of writing this way, we could improve the sentence like, talking to her secretary, Dr. Maluhu admitted her fault. So we can observe that the improved sentence is more precise and concise. Second, according to some sources, when Mr. Carrion put the jar atop the glass table, it was broken. So here at this statement, we can ask that, what was broken? Was it the jar or the glass table? So instead of writing this way, we could improve this sentence like, according to some sources, the glass table had broken when Mr. Carrion placed the jar on it. Third example, the Dean of the Agriculture Department required eggs to be stamped with a date when they are laid by the animal science majors. So here we can ask, who laid the eggs? Was it the animal science major or the Dean of the Agriculture Department. So instead of writing this way, we can improve this like the Dean of the Agriculture Department required the animal science majors to stamp the eggs with the date when they are laid. So this shows an explicit and certain way of writing. Number 4, cliches. These are phrases that have been exhausted to the point where they have completely lost originality. There are phrases that needed to be avoided. It is because it lost its originality and sense. Like for example, no shadow of doubt, needless to say, strange as it may seem, stands to reason, last but not least, in any shape or form, and leave no stone unturned. So, these are words or phrases that have been overused in writing or speech and have therefore become largely meaningless. And the last one we have here, grandiloquence. So, these are expressions that are too pompous, which means that it has an exaggerated state lines and use too colorful language. For example, we have here an example of grandiloquent paragraph. A conflagration which spurred before the sun struck its rays heightened the anxiousness of the neighboring families of Maasim Elementary School on the 25th day of our Lord last year. So instead of writing this way, which is too colorful, which is too fancy, we can write into much clearer paragraph. Like, started at dawn of April 25 last year, the fire in the home economics building of Maasim Elementary School created commotions among the neighboring families. So, we can observe that it does not use an overly fancy writing. It used a much simple and precise one. So now let's move on to the transitional devices. So one way to attain the smooth flow of facts when putting them on the right perspective is the use of transitional devices. So what is a transitional devices? So they are like bridges between parts of your news. They are cues that help the reader interpret ideas your news develops. Moreover, transitional devices are words or phrases that help carry a thought from one sentence to another, from one idea to another, or from one paragraph to another. Finally, transitional devices link smoothly sentences in paragraph so that there are no abrupt jumps or breaks between ideas. You should be aware too that you only use this when needed. Do not overuse them by starting each paragraph with a transitional device. There are several types of transitional devices, and each category leads readers to make certain connections or assumptions. Some lead readers forward and imply the building of an idea or thought, while others make readers compare ideas or draw conclusions from the preceding thoughts. So here is a list of some common transitional devices that can be used to cue readers in a given way. Number 1, we have here to add, like for example, and, gain, and, then, besides, equally important, finally, further, furthermore, and so on. Second, we have here to compare, like for example, whereas, but, yet, on the other hand, however, and so on. Third, to prove, like for example, because, for the same reason, evidently, moreover, besides, and so on. Fourth, to show exception, yet, still, however, in spite of, despite of course, once in a while, sometimes. Fifth, to show time, like for example, immediately, soon, after a few hours, finally, then, later, previously, formerly, first, next, and then. 6. to repeat. For example, in brief, as said, as noted. Number 7, to emphasize. Definitely, extremely, obviously, and so on. 8, to show sequence, like first, second, third, and so forth, and so on. 9, to give an example. For example, for instance, in this case, in another case, and so on. And lastly, to summarize or conclude. Like, for example, in brief, on the whole, summing up, to conclude, in conclusion, as shown, as said, hence, therefore, accordingly, thus, as a result, and consequently. So, Miss Angeline Tibuyan will going to discuss this further.
Good day everyone. To continue the lesson 6, I will going to discuss the mastery in winning news writing competitions. One of the prime purposes of this work test is to provide aid to contestants joining press conference in any levels and in any categories, whether basic or tertiary. During the news writing competitions, the lecturer judge may confront the contestants from among the 5 situations as motivations in the contest proper. First, the lecturer judge may compel the contestants to write about the opening program of the press conference. Second, the lecturer judge may send contestants to a press briefing. Sometimes, the contestants are not aware that they are sent to a press briefing. Third, the lecturer judge may send the contestants to a specified venue to identify newsworthy topic of their choice, gather the necessary data, and finally write a 5 to 7 paragraph news article for elementary and secondary, or 7 to 12 paragraph article for tertiary. These 3 options entail the unleashing of skillful gathering of data and crafting the news article in just a spur of a moment, say 1.5 hours. The 3 options require extreme focus on major and minor details. In this way, the contestants should always have a notebook and a pen, plus a recorder. Sometimes too, the lecturer judge requires 2 direct quotes and 1 indirect quote or the otherwise. Next is the main technique is to accumulate factual statements. If necessary, read in advance about the DepEd or CHID memorandum of the event. List the rationale of the activity. Enumerate the 5 key points of the speaker while you record the message using your smartphone or digital recorder. Do not forget the theme of the event and the name of the keynote speaker. Then right away, ask the number of participants and number of competing scores. For press release motivation, make sure to know the one giving a simulated press release. Prepare the voice recorder, then jot down important information only. Start with the main 5 W's before supplying the specific W's and H. As much as possible, prepare a matrix ahead of time so that you can just shoot the specific W's and H on the cells of the matrix. List the repeated statements of the lecturer judge. Sometimes, this is what the perspective of the news which he or she most likely wants to see in your output. Also, be wary of the cause and effect factors of what the spokesperson or the lecturer judge says. Next is for the gather data write home story. The prime technique is to be wary of your own time. While going to the venue, quickly anticipate the topic that you want to report. You cannot afford to waste any time since you are only given a very limited time to gather information and write the article. Your eyes should be sharp to capture sources of news, primarily persons to interviewed and documents to be read. Make sure names, including their designations, are accurately spelled. Be careful on time elements, cause and effect relationships, and chronology of events. Get the exact name of the source, his or her age, and significant detail that will contribute to making the source a reliable and credible source of information. Next is the arrange facts make own story. It is the fourth motivation or situation in news writing competition. Here, the data will not be gathered as they are jumbled in a sheet of paper. The skill that is tested is primarily on the judicious weighing of the writer and the importance of each information so as to craft the news in its right and true perspective. In doing so, the first thing to do is to read the whole set of data to understand its direction. By reading it, contestants should do it twice, thrice, and so on, or until he or she comes in a time that he or she understands the situation on the news. He or she now labels the facts by numbering the most important to the least important facts. Then he or she makes his or her first draft and editing follows. Then lastly, the convert document to news styles. This motivation in news writing is also a challenging play. The contestants are given a document or a set of documents like a municipal ordinance or school resolution. They will be asked to convert it into a news item. Then the contestants should be skillful to detect the angle that will make the news of high interest to the lecturer judge or the reader. When the perspective is identified, weave the facts into a news article following the instructions given. Says 5 to 7 graphs or so. Then don't forget to cite the source, the chronological order, the cause and effect, and the importance of the act. Next is the other winning tips in news writing contest. In writing though, the following may be helpful tips that may veer your work from the typical entries. First is when writing a news report, use the active voice. The active voice is more understandable and has more impact. Make short, concise sentences with action verbs. Your language needs to be simple and does not have extra words that do not really contribute to the focus of the story. Just for example, the weather or the fashion statement does not need to be included unless it has a bearing on the overall story. While you are writing, try to anticipate any questions a reader might have while reading your story. Second is the lead needs to be strong to grab the reader's attention and want to read more. Remember, the main verb should be housed within the first 6 or 7 words of the paragraph. Also, if it is a hard news story, which is the breaking up news or up to the minute news, then you include as many facts as you can in the summary of the story. If it is a soft news story, a human interest story, or background information, then you must put the facts in the body of the story. Third is the lead needs to inform the reader. The lead needs to tell the reader about the story, the importance, and why he or she have to read the story. It needs to sound like you are having a conversation and that you are telling a friend about the latest news. Fourth is, some errors that are found in leads include the lead having more than one main idea, and this happens, the reader will be confused. Next is news report must suitable for all readers. Leads can exclude certain readers if it is full of jargons. Next is sentences must under 25 words and contain only one idea. Make sure to use a simple subject-verb-object form. Then do not use too many commas. And paragraphs must something new and sentences must be short and concise. Next is to never to put more than 3 prepositional phrases and more than 3 numbers in one sentences. Also, make sure to keep leads short consist of not more than 35 words. Most leads start with who or what and avoid starting leads with when, where, there, and this. Next is in leads about future event, the time, day, and place usually go at the end of the paragraph. In leads about past events, the day of the event usually appears before or after the verb. Sometimes the they comes at the end of the first sentence or the paragraph if it is a one-sentence lead. Next is keep paragraphs short. Those limited to 60 words or less or no longer than 10 typeset lines are preferred. Paragraphs limited to 1 to 3 sentences are preferred because it encourages the readers to continue reading. Next is eliminate too many that whenever possible. Next is write the news story in the future tense instead of progressive tense. Next is long title should follow the name. A title that follows the name should be lowercase and set off in commas. Shorter titles that precede names should be capitalized. Next is avoid using contractions. Always double check the spelling of names, then make sure numbers match the items listed. Then make sure to place properly the word only, because the location of only can change the meaning of the sentence. The first version of story is not good enough. Read the story out loud to catch awkward sentences constructions. Then be wary of your own time. Remember you are in a contest. And always stick to the instructions and taste of a literary judge. Do not insist what you want. Remember, you are in a contest. Next is in grammar. If none means no one or not one, use a singular verb. Example, none was found guilty. When you use a pronoun to refer to a team or a group, the proper pronoun to use is its, not they. Example, the team wants to improve its record. Make sure verbs or other phrases are parallel or in the same structure when they appear in stories or lists. Just for example, he likes gardening, fishing, and hunting. Use third person in news stories, and rare occasions will use first person or second person. Third person are like she, he, her, him, they, their. Second person is you, yours, or your. Then first person is I, mine, we, and our. Then lastly, when either, or, and neither, nor are used, the verb agrees on person with the near subject. Just for example, neither the principal nor the advisors are to blame. Next tips is in miscellaneous. When something is not clear, make a drawing of it. Putting it on paper can clarify the situation. Second, when in doubt, leave it out. This has to do with the questionable information that may libelous, incomplete information, and information the writer does not have a clear understanding of. Next is in non-sexist, non-ageist, non-discriminatory communication. First is to avoid words that reinforce ageist, racial, and ethnic stereotypes. Also, avoid racial identification except when it is essential to communication. Third is substitute asexual words for man words or sexist words. Instead of mankind, use people, humanity, human beings, or human race. In man-made, use synthetic, artificial, manufactured, of human origin. Manpower is workers, workforce, and staff, personnel. Next tips is on organization. Make sure information introduced or outlined in the leads is covered in the same order in the body of the story. Avoid introducing new information at the end of a story. All aspects of a story should usually be introduced or outlined in the first few paragraphs. Then lastly, transitions are necessary to show the reader that the writer has a sense of direction. A word, phrase, sentence, or paragraph can move the reader from one thought to another. Next is in the parts of speech. Avoid using like for us. The word like is a preposition and takes a noun or pronoun object. The us is a subordinate conjunction that introduces dependent clauses. Just for example, as the guest speaker was about to finish, she conducted a mini quiz bee. Second is most adverbs are unnecessary. Redundant adverbs weaken strong verbs. Instead of tightly clenched teeth, why not write the clenched teeth only? Or instead of the radio blurred loudly, why not write the radio blurred? Next is the most adjectives are unnecessary. The concept is oftentimes already in a noun, so use adjectives sparingly. Lastly, choose verbs that suggest what they mean. Active verbs add base, clarity, and vigor to writing. Verbs are writers' most important tools, so avoid use be verbs. Next is in punctuations. Use a comma with according to. Just for example, according to the news release, then comma. Second is avoid comma splices and comma blunders. If a comma is placed between the subject or noun and predicate or verb, it is called a comma splice. Just for example, the fountain of youth is not in Uyogan. The comma is not needed. If two independent clauses are joined by a comma, this is a comma blunder or a comma fault. Just for example, the fountain of youth is not in Uyogan. It is in Mahatao. This is known as a run-on sentence. A period or a semicolon should replace the comma. If a period is used, the I on it is also needs to be capitalized. Just for example, the fountain of youth is not in Uyogan. Period. It is in Mahatao. Then number 2, the fountain of youth is not in Uyogan, semicolon. It is in Mahatao. Next is a comma should precede such as, especially, and including when these words introduce examples. Just for example, the advertised price of the tour does not cover some personal expenses, such as laundry, entertainment, and tips. Next is especially. He likes fruits, comma, especially oranges. Next is including. In news writing, students study various approaches to writing, including the inverted triangle, chronological, narrative, personalized, and first person. When such as is used with a restrictive application, the comma is omitted. Just for example, magazines such as this should be thrown in a trash. Next is the quotation marks go outside the commas and also periods. Then they go inside semicolons and colons. Next is in a series, a comma is not needed before the and. Just for example, red, white, no comma, then and blue. Next is the dash is a long mark. This should be a space before and after the dash. The hyphen is a short mark and is used to divide words or to link hyphenated adjectives. Just for example, frequently space misused words, not frequently dash misused words. Next is use an exclamation point in only the rarest of situations and only after brief interjections. The order of the words in a sentence should be arranged in such a way that they make the desired impression. Let the reader decide if the content is humorous or exciting on his or her own. Let's go to the quotes and attribution. Use attribution only once per paragraph. Attribution is needed when policy change statements are made, when opinions are expressed, or when professional opinions from physicians, scientists, engineers, and others are used. Then attribution is not needed when the facts are commonplace and not subject to dispute or when they are accepted and historically true. Attribution should not be placed at the end of the first sentence when the quote is made of two or more sentences. When one quote follows another, but the second one is from different source, the attribution of the second quote should be placed at the beginning of it. Word said is the best word for attribution. Other words can be used, but they should accurately represent how something is said. Next is use past tense verbs said versus says for attribution in news stories. Let the quotes begin the paragraph. When quote marks attracts the reader's eyes. Avoid the use of partial quotes. Quote or paraphrase material. Do not mix the two. Each time a different source is cited, you must start a new paragraph. In sentence structure, avoid using the same word twice in a sentence. Then, the optimum prime of numbers to use in a sentence is 14 to 17. The average reader can hardly comprehend a sentence with more than 35 words. When writing becomes cumbersome, turn one long sentence into 2 or 3 shorter ones. If a long sentence must be used, place a short sentence before and after it. You must not have more than 3 consecutive prepositional phrases in a sentences, and count the words in story sentences. Sentence length should vary, as stories become dull when sentences are all the same in length. Lastly, do not start or end a sentence with however. Start the sentence and then work however into it as soon as possible. This word is intended to cause an interruption in thought. In vocabulary, use simple words and never send the reader to the dictionary. Words such as thing and a lot annoy some readers, so avoid using them. Third is be careful how the word held is used. Make sure the object can be held physically. Just for example, the week 1 is the meeting will be held at noon Monday in Anthony Administration Building, room 125. To make it better, the meeting will be at noon Monday in Anthony Administration Building, room 125. Next is avoid using words that qualify how someone feels, thinks, or sees. Little qualifiers include the following: a bit, a little, sort of, kind of, and etc. Next is avoid technical jargons unless 95% or more of the readers will understand it. If technical jargon is used and it will not be understood by the majority of readers, be sure to explain each term used. Then learn the difference between affect, usually a verb, and effect, usually a noun. Also, you must know the difference between its, no apostrophe for possessive pronoun, and its with apostrophe, the contraction of it is. Just for example, the dog has a thorn in its paw. It has no apostrophe as it is a possessive pronoun. The second one is it's time to go. It has an apostrophe because it is the contraction of the word it is. Next is you must know when to use their, possessive pronoun, their, adverb, and their, the contraction of the word they are. Just for example, it is their project. It is a possessive pronoun. The project is over there, the adverb. Then they're working together on the project, the contraction of the word they are. Next is know the difference between whose, the possessive pronoun, and whose, contraction of who is. Just for example, whose coat is this? It is a possessive pronoun. Then who's going on a trip? It uses who with the apostrophe s, the contraction of who is. Next, know when to use to, preposition, to, adverb, and to, adjective. So, just for example, the team is going to Palarong Pambansa in Albay. A preposition. The public relations group wants to go to. An adverb. The two groups will go to Legazpi instead. An adjective. Next is in connection with suicides. It is best to say that the person was found dead or fell or plunged to his or her death. And it is better to use died by suicide rather than committed suicide. In connection with the arrest, it's better to write arrested in connection with, or sought in connection with, charged with, or arrested on charges of. In injuries, it's better to use suffered or sustained, not received. With murder, arrests are made in connection with the death of. It should not be reported that a victim was murdered until someone is convicted of a crime. In obituaries, it may be said the victim was killed or slain. Then always remember two objects must be moving to collide. If a vehicle runs into a sparked one or an object, say the vehicle is struck, the stationary one. With fires, a building is destroyed, not completely destroyed. And buildings are also damaged lightly, moderately, or heavily. Fire may gut or destroy the interior of the building. To raise a building is to level it to the ground. Lastly, sometimes information cannot be verified. So if doubt exists, report the person was listed by police as Cardo Dalisay or he gave his name as Cardo Dalisay. And if the person has no identification, use unidentified, not unnamed. Then, if there are questions about where a person lives, report address not given or address is unknown. That would be all for lesson 6. Thank you for listening. Keep safe and God bless.